When my son walked out that morning, he didn't say goodbye. He just closed the door softly behind him, and the sound of it stayed with me longer than I expected. I stood there, holding my coffee cup, listening to the car engine start. The smell of toast still lingered in the air. The sun hadn't even risen all the way yet. That soft, sleepy orange glow filled the kitchen. And yet somehow, the day already felt over. He didn't look back. I told myself it was just another argument. Maybe tomorrow he'd call. Maybe next week he'd come by. But deep down I knew. I could feel it in my bones. That was the day my son walked out of my life. I don't blame him entirely. I suppose I always feared this would happen, that after years of doing everything alone, pouring every bit of myself into raising him, one day he'd get tired of me. Maybe of the weight of my love, maybe of the reminders of what we'd been through together. I used to tell myself, he's my reason for living. But sometimes I wonder if I became too much of a reason, too present, too protective, too everything. He used to smile when he came home, you know. "Mom, I'm starving," he'd shout, dropping his backpack on the couch. And I'd laugh, pretending to be annoyed while already pulling out the skillet. Those little things, the laughter, the messy dinners, the silly late-night talks, they were my world. My quiet treasures. But now, the house feels like a museum, still, frozen, waiting for someone who isn't coming back. People always tell me I'm strong, that I did an amazing job raising him by myself after his father left. But strength feels different when you have no one left to be strong for. That morning, as I stood by the window watching his car disappear down the street, I whispered the same words I had said the first day he started kindergarten. "Go ahead, sweetheart. You'll do great. Just don't forget where home is." But sometimes they do forget, and maybe that's what hurts the most. My name is Alinda Cooper, and I've lived in the same small house on the edge of Cedar Grove for over 30 years. It's nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a little porch that creaks when you step on it, but it's home. I bought this house when I was 26, just after my husband, Tom, and I got married. We were young and full of plans. He worked construction. I worked part-time at the grocery store. We thought we had the world figured out, but life doesn't always go the way you plan it. When I got pregnant, Tom was thrilled. He painted the nursery himself, soft blue walls, white crib, tiny curtains with little stars. He used to rest his hand on my belly every night and whisper to the baby, "Hey, little buddy, I can't wait to meet you." For a while, everything was perfect. Until the day he didn't come home. It was raining that night. I remember standing by the window, watching the headlights pass, waiting. He had gone to work early that morning, said he'd be late. But midnight came and went. The phone rang around 2 a.m. There had been an accident on the highway. A truck overturned in the rain. Tom didn't make it. I was 7 months pregnant. People came, said their kind words, brought casseroles. But after a week, the world moved on. Only I was left standing still. When my son, Ethan, was born, I held him in my arms and cried harder than I ever had before. He had Tom's eyes, that same deep brown that looked both gentle and strong at once. I remember whispering, "It's just you and me now, baby. We're going to be okay." And somehow, we were. Those early years were tough. I worked long shifts at the grocery store, sometimes 2 jobs when bills piled up. I'd come home exhausted, but seeing Ethan smile made it worth it. We didn't have much, but we had each other. On nights when I couldn't afford heat, we'd pile blankets on the couch, make popcorn, and watch old movies on TV. I'd tuck him in and say, "You're my sunshine, kiddo." He'd grin and reply, "You're my moon." Mom, he grew up fast, too fast, always curious, always asking questions. When he was little, he used to fix things around the house with me. I'd hand him a small screwdriver and he'd say, "We're a team, right, Mom?" We were. When he started school, I joined the PTA. I wanted to be there, to see his smile during the school play, to cheer him on during soccer games. I worked nights just so I could be free during the day. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. People would ask, "Don't you ever get tired?" And I'd smile. Of course, but I'd do anything for him. As he grew older, I tried to give him the kind of life Tom would have wanted him to have. Stability, warmth, love. I made sure he had what he needed, even if it meant I went without. When Ethan turned 16, he got his first job at the hardware store downtown. He came home proud, waving his first paycheck. "Look, Mom, I'm finally helping out." I laughed and told him to keep it. But he insisted on paying the electric bill. That's the kind of boy he was. Kind, thoughtful. He'd come home late sometimes, smelling like sawdust and coffee, tired but smiling. We'd sit at the kitchen table sipping tea, talking about his day. Those were the moments I lived for. Then came college. He got accepted into a university 2 states away. I was over the moon, but deep down, my heart ached. I had never been apart from him for more than a weekend. I helped him pack, trying not to show how scared I was. "You'll call me, right?" I asked. He smiled. "Of course, Mom, every day." And he did. At first. The calls came less often as the months went by. Then just once a week. Then once every few weeks. When he came home for holidays, he seemed different, grown up, independent. He talked about his classes, his new friends, his plans. I was proud, but there was a new distance in his voice, like he belonged more to that world than to mine now. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was normal. That's what growing up meant. But after graduation, things really changed. He got a job in the city, 3 hours away. He met a girl named Rachel, a kind, bright young woman who worked in marketing. I liked her immediately. She had a warm smile and called me Mrs. Cooper, even when I told her to call me Linda. For a while, it felt like things were good again. They visited often. We had Sunday dinners, laughed, shared stories. I thought I was gaining a daughter, not losing a son. But little by little, Ethan started calling less. He started missing dinners. He said work was busy or traffic was bad. Then came the excuses. And before I knew it, months had passed between visits. I told myself he was just busy building his life. That's what I wanted for him, after all. But deep down, I couldn't help feeling like I was being left behind. The first real change I noticed was small, almost invisible at first. It was a Sunday morning in early spring. I had cooked Ethan's favorite breakfast, pancakes with blueberries, the kind I used to make when he was a little boy. I even brewed the coffee just how he liked it, light cream, no sugar. I set the table neatly, humming to myself, waiting to hear his car pull up in the driveway. He had said he'd come by at 10, but by noon, there was still no sign of him. I checked my phone, no message. I called, but it went straight to voicemail. "Hey, sweetheart, it's Mom," I said softly. "Just wondering if you're still coming." "I made breakfast. Call me when you can." The pancakes grew cold. He finally called around 3. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said. "Rachel wasn't feeling well, and we decided to stay in today." I tried to sound understanding. "Oh, that's okay, honey. I just wanted to make sure you were all right." He thanked me and hung up quickly. I sat there for a long time after, staring at the half-empty coffee cups on the table. The next few weeks were much the same. He used to call every evening after work, even if just for a few minutes. Now the calls came once or twice a week, sometimes less. When I did manage to talk to him, his voice always sounded distracted. I could hear city noises in the background, cars honking, people talking, laughter. "How's work, Ethan?" I'd ask. "Good, Mom. Busy, you know how it is." "I do," I'd say softly, though I really didn't. He always seemed to have somewhere else to be. "Listen, Mom, can I call you later?" "I'm just heading out." "Sure, honey. Be safe." But later rarely came. I tried to fill my days with small things. Gardening, volunteering at the library, baking for the neighbors. I kept myself busy, but the evenings were the hardest. The house felt too quiet, too big for just me. Sometimes I'd catch myself talking to the empty room, old habits that refused to die. "Ethan, don't forget your lunch," I'd murmur as I packed leftovers into containers. Even though no one was there to take them, I suppose that's what motherhood does to you. It turns your life into a rhythm built around someone else. And when that rhythm stops, you don't quite know how to move anymore. Then one afternoon, out of the blue, Ethan called. "Hey, Mom. Guess what? Rachel and I are getting married." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. "Married?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "Oh, Ethan. Congratulations. I meant it. I truly did. I could hear the joy in his voice, and it filled me with warmth. But a part of me also ached, not from jealousy, not from loss, just a quiet sadness that another chapter of our lives had ended. He told me about their plans, a small ceremony, just close friends and family. He said they'd send me the details soon. When we hung up, I sat in my rocking chair for a long time, thinking about how fast everything had changed. I remembered the little boy who used to run to me after school, his backpack bouncing, shouting, "Mom, guess what I did today?" And now, he was a grown man starting his own life. The wedding was beautiful, simple, elegant, filled with laughter. Rachel looked radiant in her ivory dress, and Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her. I was proud of him, proud and grateful that he'd found happiness. During the ceremony, as they exchanged vows, I felt tears sting my eyes. But they weren't tears of sorrow. They were the kind that come when your heart is full, too full for words. Afterward, Ethan hugged me and said, "Thanks for everything. Mom, I wouldn't be here without you. It was all I needed to hear." For a while after that, things were good again. They called often, sent pictures, invited me over for dinner. Rachel even asked for my recipe for apple pie. I felt like I had a family again. But slowly, the visits became less frequent. At first, it was small excuses. "Mom, we're swamped with work this week." Then, "Rachel's parents are visiting, so we're spending time with them." I told myself it was fine. They were newlyweds, building their life together. I didn't want to intrude. But as months passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being forgotten. One day I decided to surprise them. I baked a pie and drove the 3 hours to their house. It was a quiet neighborhood with neat lawns and identical mailboxes. I knocked on the door, smiling, heart racing like a schoolgirl's. When Rachel opened it, her smile faltered for just a second before she caught herself. "Oh, Mrs. Cooper. What a surprise!" Her voice was polite but stiff. I held out the pie. "I made your favorite, sweetie. I was in the area and thought I'd stop by." "Oh, that's so kind," she said. "Ethan's not home right now. He's at work." "That's all right," I said. "I can wait," she hesitated. "Actually, we were just about to head out to meet friends for dinner." I nodded, pretending not to notice the discomfort in her eyes. "Of course, I don't want to keep you." She smiled again, a little too tightly. "Let me give him your message, okay?" I handed her the pie and turned back toward my car. The wind was cold that day. I remember how heavy my steps felt. I sat in the car for a few minutes before driving away. I told myself not to take it personally. She was probably just busy. But as I drove home, that ache inside me deepened. Weeks passed before Ethan called. When he finally did, his voice sounded strained. "Mom, listen. Maybe next time, just call before you come by, okay? Rachel gets overwhelmed when plans change suddenly." "Oh," I said softly. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to see you." "I know, Mom," he said quickly. "It's just, we're both really busy right now." "I understand." We talked a few more minutes, but something had shifted. There was a distance now, an invisible wall I didn't know how to cross. After that, I started hearing less from him. Birthdays came and went with short phone calls. Holidays were spent apart. "We'll come by next weekend," he'd say, but next weekend rarely came. I decorated the Christmas tree alone that year. I hung up the old ornaments, the ones we made together when he was little. There was the clay star he painted in kindergarten, the crooked angel made from paper and glue. I smiled as I placed them on the branches, pretending he was there beside me. When New Year's Eve came, I sat by the window, watching fireworks in the distance. The phone stayed silent. One morning, while sorting through old photos, I found one that stopped me cold. It was a picture of us, taken on his high school graduation day. He was smiling, arm around my shoulder, his cap tilted sideways. My own smile was wide and bright. I remembered how proud I was that day, how certain I'd done something right. Now, looking at that photo, I wondered when things had started to go wrong. Was it when I called too often? Or when I didn't know how to let go? I'd always thought love meant holding on. But maybe sometimes love also means stepping back. That summer, I decided to visit again, this time after calling first. Rachel sounded cheerful on the phone. Of course, Mrs. Cooper. Come by Saturday afternoon. I baked cookies and wrapped a small gift, a framed photo of Ethan as a baby. I thought it might make them smile. When I arrived, they welcomed me kindly, but I could sense the tension in the air. We sat in the living room, making polite conversation. Ethan seemed nervous, checking his phone now and then. Rachel tried to fill the silence with talk about her work, their new furniture, the weather. At one point, I reached over and touched Ethan's hand. I'm proud of you, sweetheart, I said softly. You've built a beautiful life. He smiled faintly, but his eyes drifted away. That evening, as I got ready to leave, I asked, Will you visit soon? He hesitated. We'll see, Mom. Things are pretty hectic right now. I nodded, pretending not to notice how Rachel avoided my eyes. When I got home that night, I cried for the first time in a long while, quietly, the kind of tears that come when your heart understands something your mind doesn't want to accept. The months that followed were quieter than ever. Ethan called occasionally, always short, always rushed. He talked about work, about the house, about the weather, but never about us. Once, I tried to tell him I missed him. You don't have to, Mom, he said. I'm fine. I know, honey. I just miss hearing your voice. He sighed softly. I'll try to call more, okay? But he didn't. Sometimes, I'd catch sight of a young man at the grocery store or in town, tall, brown-haired, wearing the same kind of jacket Ethan used to wear. And for a moment, my heart would leap. Then I'd remember he wasn't here. That's the thing about love. It doesn't switch off. It lingers in small things. The smell of coffee, the echo of laughter, the sound of a car door closing. And though I never said it out loud, I could feel it, the slow fading of something that once held us together. He had built a new life. And in that new life, I didn't quite fit anymore. It was late autumn when it finally happened. The day everything changed. The air had turned crisp, and the trees outside my window were shedding their leaves. I remember sitting by the kitchen table that morning, sipping coffee, looking out at the maple in the front yard. Its leaves were the same shade of amber as Ethan's hair when he was little. I smiled at the memory, the way he used to rake the leaves into piles, only to jump into them moments later, laughing as they flew around like confetti. Back then, he used to say, Mom, don't ever let the leaves go without me. Funny how the smallest memories can hurt the most. That day, I decided to call him. I hadn't heard from him in weeks. I told myself it was just to check in, but deep down, I needed to hear his voice. He didn't answer, so I left a message. Hi, sweetheart. Just wondering how you're doing. I miss you. Call me when you can. Hours passed. The phone stayed silent. The next morning, I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. Hey, Mom. Sorry I've been busy. We've been trying to get the house ready for the baby shower this weekend. I froze. The baby shower? I hadn't even known Rachel was pregnant. I sat down, heart pounding, reading the message again and again, a grandchild. My first grandchild. Tears filled my eyes, not from sadness, but from the shock of realizing how much I'd missed. I typed back, Oh, sweetheart, congratulations. I didn't know. I'm so happy for you both. Do you need any help with the shower? I stared at the screen, waiting for the 3 dots to appear, the little sign that he was typing. But they never came. He didn't reply. A few days later, I gathered my courage and called. This time, he answered. Hey, Mom, he said, sounding distracted. Hi, honey. I got your message. I can't believe I'm going to be a grandmother. He chuckled softly. Yeah, it's exciting. Rachel's doing great. I was wondering, I began carefully, should I bring anything to the shower? Maybe a dish or some decorations? There was a pause, a long, quiet pause. Mom, he said finally, about that. It's kind of a small thing. Just Rachel's friends and family, mostly women. You know how these things go. I swallowed hard. Oh, I see, he hesitated. We'll have you over another time, okay? Maybe after the baby's here? Of course, I said softly. That makes sense. We hung up soon after. I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand, staring at the laundry half folded on the couch. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about it, about how I wasn't part of this new chapter in his life. I'd raised him through every stage. First steps, first day of school, first heartbreak. And now, when he was about to start a family of his own, I was being gently pushed aside. A week later, I was at the grocery store when I bumped into one of my old neighbors, Lisa. She smiled brightly. "Linda, I saw pictures of Ethan's baby shower online. Rachel looked beautiful." My heart stopped. "Pictures?" I asked, forcing a smile. "Oh yes, Rachel's sister posted them. It looked lovely. You must be so proud." I managed to nod, but inside, something cracked. That evening, I went online and searched for Rachel's profile. Her page was public. It didn't take long to find the photos. A living room filled with balloons, pastel decorations, smiling faces. Ethan stood beside Rachel, his arm around her, beaming. They looked happy. But as I scrolled through photo after photo, I realized I wasn't in a single one because I hadn't been invited. I didn't call him that night. I didn't want to sound bitter. I didn't want to make it about me, but the silence between us grew heavier with every passing day. A month later, Rachel gave birth to a baby girl. Her name was Emma. Ethan sent a brief text with a photo. "She's here. Shakespeare is our spouse. Both doing great." I stared at that tiny face on my phone screen, her soft cheeks, her little hands, and felt tears spill down my face. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to smell her hair and whisper, "Welcome to the world, sweetheart." But the days went by and no invitation came. I sent gifts, a blanket I crocheted, a small teddy bear, a card. No response, so I waited and hoped. Finally, after nearly 2 months, Ethan called. "Hey, Mom, we're having Emma's christening next weekend. Thought you'd want to come." I felt my heart lift. "Of course, honey. I wouldn't miss it for the world." He gave me the details, and I marked the day on my calendar with shaky hands. The church was small and lovely, filled with family and friends. Rachel's parents were there, along with her sisters and cousins. Everyone seemed to know each other, except me. When I arrived, Rachel greeted me politely, but quickly moved on to talk to someone else. Ethan gave me a brief hug, then got pulled away by a group of friends. I sat quietly in the back pew, holding the little silver cross I'd bought as a gift. When the ceremony began, I watched as they stood at the altar, Rachel holding Emma, Ethan beside her, both glowing with pride. I smiled through my tears, but as the pastor spoke, something in me broke quietly. I realized that I was just a guest now, a visitor in the life I once belonged to. After the ceremony, people gathered in the church hall for lunch. I handed Rachel the small box with the cross inside. "It's beautiful," she said, smiling briefly before turning to talk to someone else. I stood there for a moment, then quietly walked outside. The air was cool, the sky pale blue. I sat on a bench near the parking lot and watched the leaves fall around me. That's when I heard voices, Ethan and Rachel, just around the corner. I didn't mean to listen, but their words carried clearly in the still air. "She's just lonely," Rachel was saying softly. "She means well, but it's a lot. I feel like every time she comes, she's judging everything I do," Ethan sighed. "I know, I just don't want to hurt her." "Then tell her, Ethan," Rachel said gently. "She needs to let us live our life. She can visit, but not all the time." There was a pause. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll talk to her." I sat frozen. They hadn't seen me. They didn't know I was there. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My chest felt tight, my hands cold. Then I stood slowly, quietly, and walked back to my car. I didn't cry. Not then. I just drove home in silence. The next morning, Ethan called. "Hey, Mom, can we talk for a minute?" "Of course," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He hesitated. "Look, I love you. You know that. But I think maybe you should give us a little space for a while. Rachel's still adjusting, and things are hectic with the baby." I took a deep breath. "I understand, Ethan, I really do." "Thanks, Mom," he said with relief. "You're the best." We hung up, and then I cried, not loud, not wild, just quiet tears that soaked into my pillow. I wasn't angry, just heartbroken, because I finally realized what I'd been avoiding all along, that I had raised him to stand on his own, and now he had. The days that followed were heavy. I went about my routine, gardening, reading, small errands, but everything felt muted. Sometimes I'd catch myself reaching for the phone, wanting to call, and then I'd stop. I started writing letters instead, ones I never sent. In one, I wrote, "Dear Ethan, I don't blame you. I know life moves forward. I just miss you. Not the grown man, but the little boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder. I hope you know that no matter how far you go, my heart goes with you." I kept the letters in a box on my nightstand, beside the photo of us from his graduation day. One evening, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, a delivery man stood there holding a large package. "From Ethan Cooper," the label read. Inside was a digital photo frame. When I plugged it in, it started cycling through pictures of Ethan, Rachel, and baby Emma. Each photo faded into the next. The baby's first smile, Rachel holding her close, Ethan pushing a stroller through the park. I stood there watching for a long time, tears running down my cheeks. It wasn't the same as being there, but it was something. Maybe his way of saying, "I haven't forgotten you." Still, I couldn't shake the loneliness. There's a particular kind of silence that fills a house when there's no one left to call your name. It's deep. It's endless. Sometimes I'd walk into his old room and just stand there, looking at the baseball trophies, the posters, the old guitar leaning against the wall. I'd whisper, "You did good, Ethan. You did real good." And somehow, that helped. Months went by. Then one morning, I got a small envelope in the mail. It was a thank you card from Rachel. Inside, written in neat handwriting, were the words, "Dear Mrs. Cooper, thank you for the silver cross. It means a lot to us. Emma wears it every Sunday. Hope you're doing well. Love, Rachel." I smiled through my tears. Maybe things were softening, just a little. That night, I went out to the porch and looked up at the stars. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel quite so empty. Maybe this was what motherhood really was. Learning to love even when you're not needed. Learning to let go but still hold space in your heart. I closed my eyes, whispered a quiet prayer for Ethan and his little family, and went back inside. The first few months after that call felt like walking through a fog. I would go through my days quietly, doing the things I'd always done, sweeping the porch, watering the plants, making tea in the evenings. But everything felt slower, gentler, as if the world itself had dimmed a little. There were moments when I'd still reach for the phone out of habit. I'd scroll through old messages from Ethan or replay the voicemail he left me on my birthday the year before, just to hear his voice. "Love you, Mom," he'd said at the end of that message. Those 3 words carried me through more lonely nights than I can count. It was early spring when I decided to make some changes. I joined a small community center nearby that hosted workshops and social gatherings for older adults. At first I was nervous. I hadn't been around new people in years, but the first time I walked into that room, I was greeted with warm smiles and open hearts. There was Margaret, a retired teacher who loved knitting scarves for the local shelter. There was Harold, who brought everyone cookies every Tuesday because he needed a reason to keep baking. And there was Ella, a quiet widow like me, who painted beautiful landscapes even though her hands shook. We became friends, gentle, patient friends. We'd sit in a circle with cups of tea and talk about our children, our memories, our regrets. It surprised me how many of us shared the same ache, children who had grown distant, lives that had changed without warning. One afternoon, as I listened to Ella talk about her son who'd moved abroad and barely called anymore, I realized something. I wasn't alone in this. There were thousands of mothers like me, sitting in quiet houses, holding on to the same kind of love, the kind that doesn't fade, even when it's forgotten. That thought gave me comfort. Slowly, the house began to feel alive again. I filled the empty spaces with plants, ferns, lilies, small pots of herbs by the kitchen window. I started baking again too, though I usually ended up giving most of it away. It wasn't about staying busy. It was about healing. One day, I found myself knitting a tiny yellow sweater. I didn't plan it. My hands just started moving. I realized halfway through that I was making it for Emma. I smiled at the thought and finished it in 2 days. Then I packed it carefully in a box with a note. For Emma, made with love. From Grandma. I hesitated before sealing the box, wondering if I should even send it. What if they didn't respond? What if it made things worse? But then I remembered something I used to tell Ethan when he was little. Love isn't about what comes back. It's about what you give. So I sent it. A week later, I got a photo message from Ethan. It was Emma, wearing the yellow sweater. Her little smile lit up the whole picture. Below the photo, he'd written, "She loves it, Mom. Thank you." Just 4 words. But they meant everything. After that, things began to shift. Slowly but surely, Ethan started calling every few weeks. Short conversations, but real ones. He'd tell me about work, about how tired Rachel was, but how happy they both felt watching Emma grow. Sometimes I'd hear Emma's giggle in the background, and my heart would fill right up. One afternoon, he called just to ask for my recipe for chicken pot pie. That made me laugh. "Really, Ethan?" I teased. "After all these years, now you want to learn how to cook?" He laughed too. "Yeah, well, Rachel's tired and I promised her I'd make dinner. I figured I'd start with something you used to make when I was a kid." There was a pause then, the soft kind, the one that holds more love than words. "Mom," he said quietly, "I miss your cooking." "I miss you," that was all it took. My throat tightened, but I smiled through it. "I miss you too, sweetheart." A few weeks later, he showed up at my door. It was a sunny Saturday morning. I was just finishing breakfast when I heard the knock. When I opened the door, there he was, standing on the porch, holding Emma in his arms. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. I couldn't speak. I just covered my mouth with my hand and let the tears fall. He smiled, eyes shining, and stepped forward to hug me. "Thought we'd come by for a visit." "Hope that's okay." "Of course," I whispered. "Of course it is." Emma looked at me with those big, curious eyes, the same eyes Ethan had when he was her age. She reached out, grabbing a strand of my hair, and giggled. I laughed too. "Well, hello there, little one. We spent the whole afternoon together. I made lunch, chicken pot pie, of course, and Ethan helped me set the table. It felt so natural, like we'd just slipped back into something we'd always known." Rachel came by later to pick them up. She seemed softer than before, tired but kind. "Thank you for having us," she said. "Emma had a wonderful time." "She's a sweetheart," I replied. "You're doing a wonderful job with her." For the first time, Rachel smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Thank you." When they left, my heart felt full. After that, visits became more frequent. Sometimes they'd stop by for dinner. Sometimes I'd go over and babysit Emma while they ran errands. We didn't talk about the months we'd lost. There was no need. Love doesn't need explanations. It just needs space to grow again. I found joy in the smallest things. The way Emma's little hands clapped when she saw me. The way Ethan would drop by just to fix something around the house. There were moments of silence, too. But they were peaceful now, not empty. One evening, Ethan and I were sitting on the porch after dinner. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. "Mom," he said after a while, "I owe you an apology." I looked at him, surprised. "For what?" "For pulling away. For making you feel alone." I shook my head gently. "You don't owe me anything, Ethan. You were just building your own life." "That's what I raised you to do," he sighed. "Still, I should have done better. Rachel and we were overwhelmed, and I didn't realize how much I was hurting you." I reached out and touched his hand. "You were learning how to be a husband and a father. That's not easy. I understand," he smiled softly. "You've always been too forgiving," I smiled back. "No, just a mother." We sat there in silence, listening to the crickets. Then he said, "You know, Emma loves that photo frame you sent. Every time it switches to a picture of you, she points and says, 'Grandma.'" I laughed, wiping a tear. "Does she really?" "She does," he said, grinning. "Guess you made quite the impression." That night after they left, I stood on the porch long after their car disappeared down the road. The stars were bright, and for the first time in a long while, my heart felt completely at peace. Over the next few months, our lives found a gentle rhythm. Sundays became family days. They'd come over for breakfast, and I'd cook pancakes the way Ethan liked them, crispy on the edges, soft in the middle. Sometimes Rachel would help me in the kitchen, and we'd talk about little things, Emma's favorite songs, new recipes, the flowers blooming in the garden. It wasn't the same as before, but it was something new, something real. We were learning how to be family again, not mother and child clinging to the past, but adults walking side by side. One afternoon, Rachel stayed behind while Ethan took Emma to the park. We were sitting at the kitchen table sipping tea. The sunlight was warm and quiet. She looked at me for a moment, then said softly, "I owe you an apology, too." I was surprised. "You don't have to—" "No, I do," she interrupted gently. I was scared of failing, of not being good enough. I thought if I kept Ethan close, I'd somehow keep things under control. I didn't realize how much I was shutting you out. I reached across the table and took her hand. "Rachel, being a new mother is hard. You were doing your best. I understand," her eyes filled with tears. "You're too kind," I smiled. "Kindness is the only thing that lasts," she nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you for not giving up on us." I squeezed her hand. "Thank you for loving my son. That's all I ever wanted." That night, I sat by the window watching the moon rise. I thought about everything. The years of struggle, the silence, the waiting. And somehow, I realized that none of it was wasted. All the love I'd given, all the tears I'd cried, they had built something. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And that, I decided, was enough. A few weeks later, Ethan and Rachel invited me to join them for Emma's second birthday. The house was filled with laughter and children's voices. There were balloons everywhere, and Emma wore a tiny crown that said, "2." When it was time for cake, Ethan lifted her up so she could blow out the candles. She looked at me and said, "Grandma, help!" Everyone laughed, and I leaned in to help her blow. In that moment, surrounded by warmth and laughter, I realized how far we'd come. I had raised him alone, and yes, he had walked away, but he'd also come back, not as my little boy, but as a man, one who loved, one who learned, one who finally understood. That night, after the party, Ethan walked me to my car. "Thank you for coming, Mom," he said softly. I smiled. "Thank you for letting me be part of her life." He hugged me tightly. "You'll always be part of our life. Always." As I drove home, the moonlight spilled across the road, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Real, quiet peace. Life has a way of coming full circle when we least expect it. It's been a few years since that difficult time. Ethan and Rachel are doing well now, busier than ever with their jobs. They're home, and little Emma, who's growing faster than I can believe. Every Sunday morning, I hear the sound of a small car pulling up outside, followed by Emma's bright laughter running up the walkway. She always bursts through the door shouting, "Grandma, we're here!" before I can even get to the doorknob. And every time, I feel that same rush of joy, that same quiet gratitude that fills the spaces that used to ache. Sometimes when she naps in my arms, I find myself watching her tiny fingers and thinking about how much love can change through generations. I remember the first time I held Ethan. So small, so new, his little hand wrapped around my thumb. I promised him that day that I would always protect him, no matter what. And I did. Even when he grew distant. Even when the silence grew heavy. Even when he walked away. Because motherhood, I've learned, doesn't end when a child grows up. It just changes shape. It becomes quieter, softer, but no less powerful. There are moments now when Ethan looks at me with the same expression he had as a boy. A look that says, "Thank you," even when he doesn't say the words aloud. And sometimes I catch Rachel watching me and smiling, as if she finally understands what it means to be a mother who loves with everything she has. I don't hold on to resentment anymore. The years taught me that love cannot thrive where bitterness lives. It took time and tears and faith, but forgiveness found me. Gently, like morning light through a half-open curtain, I forgive Ethan for leaving. I forgive Rachel for misunderstanding, and I forgive myself for the moments I felt I had failed, because none of us truly failed. We were just learning the hard, human way how to love better. My house feels different now. It's no longer silent, but filled with laughter and small footprints. There's a photo wall by the staircase, filled with memories. Ethan as a little boy holding his first baseball glove, me on my front porch with a cup of tea, and now Emma grinning with cake on her face. Each frame tells a story, not just of family, but of growth, loss, and the beautiful way life mends what was once broken. When I look at those pictures, I see more than the years that passed. I see grace. One evening, not long ago, I found an old box in my closet, filled with letters I had written but never sent. Letters to Ethan during the years we barely spoke. Letters full of love, fear, and hope. I sat down on my bed and began reading them, one by one. In one of them I had written, "If you ever feel lost, remember that home is not a place. It's a person who loves you, no matter how far you've gone." I smiled, folded the letter, and tucked it back into the box, because now I knew he had found his way home, not just to my house, but to my heart again. Sometimes I sit on the porch at dusk, tea in hand, watching the sky fade into shades of gold and lavender. That's my favorite time of day, the quiet hour when the world softens. I think about all the mothers out there who might be feeling the same ache I once did. Those who gave everything, and now sit in silence, wondering if their children remember them. If I could sit beside them, I would tell them this: love given is never wasted, even when it feels unnoticed. It leaves its mark, deep, invisible, but lasting. The love you pour out becomes part of your child's story. Whether they realize it or not, it shapes them, anchors them, and someday when life humbles them, they will remember, maybe not with words, maybe not even with a call, but in their hearts, they'll know. As for me, I've learned that peace doesn't come from holding on. It comes from letting go with grace. Letting go of expectations, letting go of old hurts, letting go of what should have been. Because when you make space in your heart, love finds its way back in, sometimes through the laughter of a child, sometimes through a quiet apology, and sometimes through the simple sound of mom whispered after years of silence. The other day, as I tucked Emma into bed during one of her sleepovers, she looked at me sleepily and said, "Grandma, you make everything feel safe." I kissed her forehead and whispered, "That's what grandmas are for." But inside, I thought, that's what love is for. To make the world feel safe, even after it's hurt you. Now, when I close my eyes at night, I don't dream of what I've lost. I dream of what I've gained, understanding, forgiveness, and the quiet joy of knowing I did my best. I raised him alone. And yes, for a while, he walked away. But love brought him back. Not because I chased, not because I begged, but because love that's patient always finds its way home. If there's one thing this journey taught me, it's that a mother's heart is stronger than time, distance, or pride. It bends, but it doesn't break. It aches, but it never stops loving. And in the end, that love, steady and quiet, is what keeps families whole. So, if you're listening tonight and you're holding on to someone who's drifted away, don't give up. Keep your heart open, keep your light on, and trust that love, in its own time, will lead them home. Because sometimes, the ones who walk away are the ones who need to find the way back to where love never stopped waiting.